Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are, to our 11th Fortepiano Salon. This salon promises to bring you a lot of very spontaneous music making, and please be prepared to participate if you so choose. And please be aware of the comment boxes. We love getting comments because we can see you and we don't know that you're there unless you let us know. So we started this series last year, or almost 2 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, when none of us could give live concerts and interact. And it's been a wonderful way to stay in touch with our colleagues and friends and audiences. And we hope that we'll still perform a similar function in the future. It's definitely easier to bring the camera to our pianos than to move them from place to place like we used to do. So, but this Salon series, as you probably know, is an outgrowth of the Academy of Fortepiano Performance, a workshop that we do every summer in Hunter, New York. And with my co-host today, Yiheng Yang and Audrey Axon, and we had a wonderful workshop last June, and 8 days of, I think we had close to something like 18 students from many, many places all over the world, some of them who knew about us through the Salon. So it's been a good combination of interactions, both virtual and live. And we had a wonderful time. We had many guests, Pierre Gois from Switzerland, Sylvia Berry from Boston. We had John Martensen doing an improvisation workshop, and also Therese de Goede. And we had many other events taking place, and not least of which was that it was combined with the Historical Keyboard Society, which held its annual meeting a few days after, so a lot of people stayed over. Now, during this workshop, we were lucky to have a videographer, Fabio Morici, who made a 5-minute video that really, I think, we're very proud of it. We are premiering this video today. It's only 5 minutes long. That shows you the flavor and the people and the interactions of our workshop. So without much further ado, I'd like to show you this wonderful video.
The Academy of Fortepiano is a really wonderful expression of a lot of the things I believe in as a musician.
We're not interested in telling students what they don't know. What we're really interested in is having the students bring all of their unique and beautiful musical personalities.
So the Academy of Fortepiano is trying to bring students an environment where they can really learn from the instruments.
Playing different pianos always helps to unlock the music that it's written for.
Within 2 hours you could play on an instrument designed in the late 1700s and then immediately go to something in the late 1800s.
They have so many different ones, and it's so enriching to be able to try all of them and practice different pieces that are more adequate for one or another.
The strength of the Academy, I think, is a spirit of openness and dialogue. It's not that you come to a festival and there are celebrity musicians or famous teachers who are going to tell you how to play music.
Now we're up to almost 20 students coming every year, and of course they all want to practice, they all want to play on all the pianos, and it's quite an organization, but it's an incredibly wonderful sense of camaraderie.
There's an atmosphere from the very beginning that gets created of people learning from each other. And I think maybe part of that is because we all, including the faculty and the guest artists who come in.
It always strikes me that every day when I walk into the restaurant to have a meal, you know, there are already groups intensely talking, and people who only met each other 2 days ago, and it feels like family.
The Academy is really unique as a summer festival because I think it is at this point one of the leading and largest academies of fortepiano study in the United States.
We have this amazing collection of original and reproduction fortepianos and harpsichords and clavichords. And each one has its own distinct voice, its own way of behaving, its own touch, its own sound. I think we're all learning from the pianos.
First time playing on this many different kinds of fortepianos and dedicating a whole week just to play on fortepianos.
It's been really interesting to get to try all the different touches and hear the different sounds.
Even if you only play on a modern piano, when you come back home, the sounds of the period you know, kind of stay with you if you have practiced on these instruments.
It's a different world. And since we don't have a time machine, this is the closest we get as musicians, right?
We believe strongly that each musician, each pianist has his or her own voice, and that we connect them with the fortepianos. And then that's where the magic happens here at the Academy.
I think here it's absolutely fascinating because you get to work with the same speaker, I guess, as the composers originally had.
You really get to, you feel like you're back with the early composers and hearing what is close to what they would have heard as possible.
I think the goal of AFP is to make playing on period pianos, historical pianos, accessible.
The moment she hit the first chord, and I was feeling like, wow, so that's how it's supposed to sound like.
The touch is so important, and I'm definitely getting a more sensitive touch being here.
This has definitely been a life-changing experience being here.
I finally realized you might play something like from different time, and on different instrument you might have to use different techniques.
Just my fingers have and my ears have both become more sensitive to the possibilities of every instrument I play.
Everyone has something to say about music, and I learn just as much from the participants every year as I do have to share with them about my own thoughts on music.
Hi, and now I would like to introduce my co-host, Yiheng Yang, who will tell you more about what we're planning for today and how things will unfold. Hi, Yiheng.
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much. And thank you again. A hearty thanks to Fabio Moric for that very enthusiastic and beautiful video about Academy of Fortepiano performance. Please check out the website, academyfortepiano.org, to learn about what's going on this summer with the workshop. And thank you again to the Catskill Mountain Foundation for sponsoring and supporting this workshop. My name is Yiheng Yang. I'm your co-host today for the International Fortepiano Salon. I'm speaking to you from Roosevelt Island, a tiny island in the East River, where I make my home, the East River of New York City, which is between roughly the UN in Manhattan and Queens. And here I'm with my Fortepiano by Christopher Clark, who is a wonderful fortepiano maker who lives in France. And this is a copy of his Walter Fortepiano by Mozart. That was Mozart's piano, sorry, by Anton Walter. Today, the topic of our salon is once again historical improvisation. We had a previous salon on historical improvisation, which was a smash hit. It was with John Mortensen and Nicola Canzano. And today, due to popular demand and also my own burning interest and love of historical improvisation, I'm so delighted to introduce to you two wonderful, brilliant younger musicians, but already mature and very accomplished in their own right, and who have taught me immense amounts and inspired me to get out of my comfort zone as a classically trained pianist and to delve into improvising in historical styles. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Suren Berry, who is in New York City. Hi, Suren.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm in beautiful room 500B at Juilliard, and this is a Mana fortepiano, a lovely instrument actually. And yeah, so my interest in improv goes back a little bit. I did a doctorate a while ago at McGill, and as doctoral theses tend to go, you start with some idea at the beginning, and then it turns into something completely different. So initially I wanted to delve into improvisation in the style of C.P.E. Bach, of all things. Coming from a modern piano background, that was quite a leap. But then that slowly transformed into something that I felt was a bit more applicable to the type of repertoire that I was working on, which sort of blossomed into a thesis pertaining to Mozart and Mozart's cadenzas. And my goal was kind of to create some kind of method, not too prescribed, but you know, when children are learning a language, they're completely immersed and they have the luxury of time, and they'll end up picking it up because their brains do that. But adults learn things differently, and I would argue people coming to university are adults, and they don't have the same amount of time. They have other obligations, and I thought I'd love to fast track a way to at least give people the ability to compose, semi-improvise cadenzas that sound as much as possible like what Mozart sounds. Now, just a brief caveat, I have absolutely no issue with people performing cadenzas that aren't like Mozart. I think that's a bit of a difficult stance to defend in the end, because when Beethoven wrote his cadenza for the D minor Mozart concerto, it doesn't sound like Mozart. It sounds awesome, but it really doesn't sound like Mozart. When Hummel composed cadenzas for Mozart's concertos, same deal. He sounded very much like himself. So I'm a big advocate for sounding like whatever it is that you want to sound like. But my preference for when I play, I kind of like the exercise of composing cadenzas that I feel sound a little bit like Mozart. And I wanted to distill some rules, some tricks that might help people accomplish that.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry to interrupt, sir.
No, go on.
I wanted to add that this really works because I've already have had Saran work with some of my pre-college pianists and my undergraduate pianists at Juilliard, and this method really does get people started, and some of my students have composed and wonderful Mozartian cadenzas thanks to Saran's help. Yeah.
That's very reassuring. I feel like I'm selling like an infomercial or something.
That's my job. You're doing great.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the thing I started with, I was inspired by some pre-existing writings about cadenzas. The main one being a section from Daniel Gottlob Türk's Klavierschule. And he lays out all these rules. And what I found, rules for improvising cadenzas. And what I found really funny about these rules is that they're not rules. There were only a few of them that were actually rules, things that you really should do. But a lot of them were along the lines of, it shouldn't be too long, or it shouldn't be too short. And it's like, well, thanks, but I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what too long is. Of course, it shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't be too anything, ideally. So that I found that a little bit frustrating, but I also found some rules, I don't remember exactly which ones, but some rules that were quite a bit more precise and that told you sort of exactly what to do in certain places. And it was in that spirit that I wanted to devise my own rules. So I went through all the Mozart cadenzas, found patterns, found commonalities between them. And based on that, I argue that, okay, if you want it to sound like Mozart, you have to do certain things and you're forbidden from doing other things, but the world is your oyster otherwise. So the first rule, everybody's been saying it, I didn't come up with it. You can't modulate away from the home key. You can tonicize a key momentarily, but none of Mozart's cadenzas ever actually confirm a different key at all. I should specify, in case people aren't aware, there are a lot of cadenzas by Mozart for his own concertos. That is important to remind people of, because it's not like we have scant evidence. There's a pretty sort of hefty body of written out cadenzas by him, so we have a general impression of what he was going for. The second rule is you have to quote some kind of theme or a motive from the concerto. It doesn't have to be a full thematic statement. You don't have to do 4 bars of something. If I'm not mistaken, the cadenza to the 23rd concerto, the first movement, the A major concerto, there's no theme, but there's a brief, I think it's right before the piano entry. So that thing. That crops up in the cadenza. I'm trying to remember exactly how that happens. Oh yeah, it's so it's not a thematic statement per se. It's like it's a rhythmic motive, but it relates to something that existed in the piece. So I think that cadenza is the one where the relationship between thematic content and cadenza is the most tenuous, but I feel like it's still there because of that little brief moment. The third rule is a subtle one, but I think it's really, really important because you really feel it when it doesn't happen. So basically, a cadenza is just a big, prolonged cadence. And what you're doing is that you're elaborating stuff. You're dodging the final arrival. You're stating themes in the home key, going away from them, doing something interesting, and ultimately coming back and ending on the tonic. But there's one thing that you really cannot do is have an ascent in the bass that goes from scale degree 5 to 1, and a descent in the upper part that goes from scale degree 2 down to scale degree 1. So this is sort of verboten in the middle of the cadenza. It's extremely final, and it's really reserved for your trill at the very end. That's kind of the point of that trill. It finally confirms the arrival with scale degree 2 to 1 and then scale degree 5 to 1 in the bass. And Mozart dodges this in his cadenzas in all sorts of different ways. He'll put an inversion of the dominant chord in the bass so that you don't get 5 to 1 in the bass, or most commonly, he'll just pick a theme that doesn't start with the tonic in the upper part. So there's no risk of you combining 5-1 in the bass and 2-1 in the upper part. And that's really, really important, I think. The fourth rule is that you have to arrive in some significant way on a predominant chord. You can tonicize it. So let's just, okay, I'm just going to use C major all the time because whatever. So you'll have some. You've tonicized your scale degree 4, and from there you can go on. But at some point it has to be tonicized. If it isn't tonicized, you can do this thing that Robert Gjerningen calls the indugio, I believe. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's like a prolongation of the predominant, typically using a voice exchange. And Mozart does that. I'm gonna bring up a couple examples of this because I can't say it better than Mozart. Where are these in my document? Sorry. Aha. Here we go. Okay, so in this, we're in the key, we're in F. It's the cadenza to K 459, the third movement, and there's this fantastic prolongation. And he eventually arrives on it. Here's another one, a beautiful one from the second movement of the G major concerto, K453. This one. So on and so forth. So that's a really effective way to confirm or to really lean on the predominant and create some tension, right? Because the predominant is like we're all expecting it to go to the dominant and then to close out the cadenza. But yeah, it's the juiciest bit of the cadence. There are other ways to to confirm the predominant that I won't get into, but those are, I think, the two main ones. You can tonicize it, or you can do some sort of like leaning on it before going on to finish your cadence. The fifth rule is that you are absolutely allowed to jump right into a root position tonic. Mozart does this pretty often, or you can start with some sort of dominant prolongation, which is also very, very common. And finally, last rule, your cadenza must include one instance of the sharpened fourth scale degree in the bass, or it can occur in the upper part. So that sounds like this, where you have or you can have it occurring in the upper part where you have, and that's really important. It's a good segue into some strategies that you can use in the cadenza, because that kind of mimics what often happens in the orchestral part right before the cadenza. So you'll have some big orchestral lead up, and then you're supposed to start playing your cadenza. And then eventually you're going to want to create that same tension. You're kind of imitating what happened in the orchestra to get the musicians sort of ready to play again. It's like a little hint that you're about to close out your cadenza. And it's really important that happen as well. And it happens in every single Mozart concerto in some shape or form. So those were the rules. And then basically after that, because there's only a few areas that you're going to be migrating to, you're going to be in the tonic, aiming for the predominant, then going to the dominant, and then back to the tonic. You can jump back and forth between those areas. And then the question that arose in my mind was, okay, well, if you can jump back and forth, what are some preferred ways that Mozart goes back and forth? And the first one that I noticed was a sort of cadential retort to what happens in the orchestra right before. So this sort of lead-in that I was describing, Mozart is really fond in a lot of his concertos of doing kind of like a wah, 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 wah. It happens quite often. So here's an example of like an embellished version of that. So this is this is the second movement cadenza of K 413, and it goes like this. So there you have. There's ways that he can just suggest this in much more bare way. So this is actually the first movement of that same concerto. So again, we're still in F major. So he goes. So it's just the bass. You don't get the upper counter melody or whatever. So that's a really effective way of like answering what the orchestra just told you. Another thing, if you find yourself back on the tonic, let's just say you do exactly this. So the orchestra sets you up and you land on your 6/4 chord, and then you do your little cadential retort, and eventually you state some kind of theme. And eventually you find yourself back on the tonic and you don't quite know where to go. You can do this thing that gets you straight back to the dominant that Mozart is very fond of. It's just it's a little progression, and it's this. I called it the dominant descent. Or another variation is, what it. Which leads you back to the dominant, and I'll show you some examples of that. So here's a right after a theme that Mozart quotes in the first movement of K450, which is this theme. I think don't remember what happens afterwards. Here's another instance of that. It's a little sort of more suave and mysterious, and it has an ostinato in the upper part, this sort of repeated thing in the upper part. So again, you get the bass. We're in B flat major, but he lands on B flat minor and goes. And I think it continues. So on and so forth. So we have like a technique to get from the dominant back to the tonic. So that's that cadential retort. And then we have a technique for getting from the tonic straight back to the dominant. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So I'm trying to cherry pick a little bit. I should actually also talk about like what if you want to stay in a given place. Let's just say you don't want to, you just want to loop, you're starting in the tonic and you want to loop right back to the tonic again. You just want to prolong that. A really common way that he does this is just with a sequence. So you're starting your tonic. And you're back. Or he'll do. And again, you started in the tonic and you ended up in the tonic again. So these are just little strategies that sound like what Mozart does. Obviously, you have to plug in thematic material, and there's an enormous amount of stylistic consideration that goes into that. So that's obviously not a given, and that takes creativity and that takes work, composing things out, seeing what sounds good to you, comparing it to what's in the literature. But I was thinking I could sort of do a very short fake cadenza, mostly just chord progressions, and kind of show you what that might sound like if you were to string all of these things together. So if you're landing, so you're in C major, the orchestra sets you up. And then let's say you decide to state your theme here. Now you're going to do a dominant descent. And I'm not ready to leave the cadenza yet. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to do that little cadential retort now. Sorry. And now I feel like I'm ready to tonicize the predominant. I'm in a good place for it. I'll just emulate what the other example was. Maybe I want to do another dominant descent. Maybe I want to do another cadential retort. I know that's kind of it's a highly prototypical version of it, but the only thing I'm thinking about is where am I landing and what are some typical protocols for either staying in that area or leaving that area. And I also know what those little protocols or strategies, rather, I know where they lead. So once I've initiated a protocol, I know I sound like a computer scientist right now, but once I've initiated something, I don't really have to think all that much about where it's going to go, because I know it's going to go, and I know it's going to sound, I know where it's going to go. I know it's going to sound kind of Mozart-y, and that's good enough for me. So there's more to this. There's more examples. There's more techniques, but that's kind of the gist of how I conceived of working on composing and eventually improvising Mozart cadenzas.
That was Seren Berry performing at the Valley of the Moon Festival on a Paul Poletti fortepiano, I believe, in style of Dulcan. And Seren is playing the first movement of Mozart's K449 E-flat major piano concerto with his own cadenza, extremely stylish and beautifully played. Thank you, Seren, and for your great ideas and presentation on how we can start to compose and improvise our own Mozart cadenzas. Really wonderful ideas that we should all start trying. Next, we're going to bring on Nathan Mondry. And thank you again to our audience for tuning in from all over. Hi, Nathan.
Hello.
Nathan is at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and I'm going to briefly introduce him. But before I do, I wanted to say hello to the audience again and make an announcement, which is the next order in our programs is Nathan. The three of us are going to improvise something, and we'll tell you more about that off of Mozart's Rondo in A minor, K511. So stay tuned for that. Then Nathan, I'm very excited, is going to be talking about improvising in the style of CP, Bach, and Scarlatti, and we're going to hear some of his wonderful playing in that style. And at the very end, the three of us will come back on and do more improvisation in the variation form, but we also need you, the audience, to give us some material to work with. So I'm asking you now to start thinking and typing in the chat box if you have a Baroque or classical style theme or melody. I'm going to limit it to just Baroque or classical style for today. a theme, or if you have an affect or a mood, just a word that describes a mood or an emotion, you can put that in the chat box. Or a genre, like I want Nathan to play a waltz in F sharp minor. You can say that, or in the style of a waltz in the style of J.C. Bach. You can. That would be unusual, but I think Nathan could do it. Or a little vignette, like Ehang went to the grocery store and tripped on a banana peel. That would be something we might be able to improvise on. So it would be a classical or Baroque theme, an affect or a mood, a genre and a composer, or a little vignette, a little short story in 2 sentences upon which one of us could structure improvisation. So please think of that, type it in the chat box anytime from now. And at the end, we may use your idea as fodder for some more improv. But before that, the 3 of us are gonna try some live playing, which I'm super nervous about, but I'm lucky to have Nathan and Seren here with me. We're gonna take the gorgeous Mozart A minor Rondo and sort of put in a different light. This is the Kershaw 511, which we all know in A minor. Nathan had the wonderful idea of transposing it into G minor. And we'll do that now. Nathan, I'll introduce you before your presentation so we can do some live playing first. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna play the original Rondo pretty much in the way Mozart lays it out in his composition, but I'll do it in G minor. And then I'll do a little couplet, a little episode in the middle. After I'm done with that, Seren will take it up from where I left off, play the Rondo again, as Rondos are. The theme keeps coming back. And then he'll do a little bit of a couplet himself, his own improvisation. Then Nathan will do the same. And then we'll wrap it up, hopefully in a succinct manner. So this is Mozart's A minor Rondo in G minor, and we are inserting ourselves into the alternating parts. Here goes nothing. All right. Beautiful, guys. Thank you so much. So mesmerizing in G minor, I hope, at least for us, we had to concentrate and focus. But that's a little bit of an exercise that, you as musicians listening in the audience, you can try. Take any composed piece and mess around with it. Take it apart. Rondos are a good form to work with. And thank you, Nathan, for that suggestion. So moving on to the next part of our program, and we're getting some great suggestions from the audience already for affects and themes. So thank you, and keep them coming. Again, we need classical Baroque themes only. Avoid pop music references because we're stuck in the 18th century. Just kidding. But the forms we want to improv in probably work better with classical and Baroque themes for today, or a mood and affect, genre and composer, or a little vignette narration. Okay, it's my great pleasure now to introduce Nathan Mondry, who is in Ithaca, New York. Nathan, tell us what's in the background there. Nathan is a very accomplished historical improviser, organist, forte pianist, harpsichordist, composer, with a lot of expertise. So excited to have you. And tell us where you're speaking to us from. What room are you in with all these beautiful instruments? Yeah.
It's a great pleasure to be speaking from the Westfield Keyboard Center, which is a room full of instruments that any person would be jealous to own, every single one of these instruments. I'm currently playing in front of an original Broadwood piano from the middle of the 19th century. Just give you a little sort of a throwback piano from its era because it's very conservatively built. Only 6 octaves, 2 strings per note. As a as a comparison, there's another original Broadwood in here from 1799, which is 5.5 octaves, but is 3 strings per note, which was far more typical for instruments, especially by the 19th century. There are a number of other wonderful instruments in here. On the very end of that corner over there, there is a Friederici clavichord copy. There's a Zilbermann piano replica over here. That's the Broadwood, the 1799 Broadwood I was talking about. We have a couple Viennese instruments, a Schantz copy. We have a Simone instrument. I really could go way too long about this, but there's an embarrassment of riches in this room.
Great, thank you for the quick tour. And again, this is the Westfield Keyboard Collection, Historical Keyboard Collection in Ithaca. But we're here today mainly to learn from Nathan, who has done a wonderful work and performs and improvises really well in historical styles up to the present styles in the present day. So Nathan, what do you want to share with us today? Tell us about your topics at hand.
So there's going to be 2 different videos you're going to see. The first one is split into 2 improvisations that were from my master's recital in Basel. What you see in front of you right now is a manuscript copy of a Scarlatti sonata, what we would call today K183, the cataloging system of Ralph Kirkpatrick. I had an idea to sort of create a schema for creating Scarlatti sonatas, because I had the impression, reading through so many of them, that even though they go to different keys and they use different figurations, that underneath it all is a lot of similar structural material. And so I had the idea for my recital to be able to prepare different versions of this as a model, but in different time signatures and in different keys, depending on what would be suggested by the audience. So essentially that involves figuring out the main harmonic structural point. In this case, it's a minor sonata, the middle section ending in the dominant minor, the various cadence points along the way, which involved me essentially creating a simple partimento of sorts that I could stretch and manipulate depending on whatever time signature and key that we were in. So I think with that, we'll play the video. The first improvisation is just based off of a suggestion of Ashamed, and it is played on the una corda of a wonderful Farini piano copy made by Denzel Raitt. The second improvisation, also on the same instrument, but without the una corda, is a version of that Scarlatti sonata, but in 6/8 and in C minor. Okay, so that was the first video of 2 different improvisations. Also going to briefly introduce the next video, which is a CPE Bach style fantasia, as he describes that you could create at the end of his treatise on playing the clavichord. There's a section on improvisation, and he more or less explains a genre that you can do, where he even says you don't really need to know much about composition. You just need to know figured bass and be able to come up with different types of stereotypical figuration patterns. He even gives you a series of different partimento bass lines with figures that you can copy and use during the course of your improvisation. He says there should be generally just a couple big cadences, one right in the middle in the dominant, and then another at the end. Talks about different ways that you can prolong the opening harmonies, whether by way of scales and runs. I can go into this even perhaps a little bit more after, but let's just hear what it sounds like.
Wonderful, Nathan. You could have fooled me. It sounded exactly like one of CPE Bach's fantasies from his Kenner and Liebhaber. That's Nathan Mondry, a historical improviser par excellence. And that was a fantasy in the style of CPE Bach. You can look at the chapter on improvisation by CPE Bach in his essay on the true art of playing keyboard instruments. And he will give you a template upon which you can begin to improvise on figured bass, as Nathan talked about. So there are all kinds of avenues and doorways into historical improvisation. As a classically trained, note perfect learning pianist myself, it has, in the past few years, liberated my mind to try this, to try to speak the language of the composer without the notes on the page as much. It has helped my sense of listening, my appreciation for what the composers are doing, and into the true meanings of what they're trying to say. I feel much more aware. So I urge you to try the things that Nathan and Søren have shared with us, and please reach out to them, and they're both very knowledgeable. So Thank you so much. Nathan, anything else you want to add on improvising in the style of CP, Bach, or Scarlatti?
I mean, I could just to reiterate some things about transposition and how important that is for, I mean, especially if you think you have no idea where to start when it comes with improvisation. I think as good a strategy as any is to just take piano pieces, keyboard pieces that you've learned, know really well, and try to do as many of them in different keys as possible, because these are, you know, conscious and subconscious ways for you to gather your various licks and, you know, things that you need to be able to pull out at a moment's notice over, especially in the case of classical music, very slow moving harmony. But if you can figure out how to do that in many different keys, that's honestly half of the hard work of improvising right there. Because again, you develop a repertoire of different tricks, solutions, ways of just reducing the music to as, you know, as few elements as possible, so that you don't get overwhelmed. You know, it's a way to make, you can get, you know, all weedy into the details, but it's just as important to have the full forest view to really be able to, I've described it to people when you improvise of, it's almost like you're like a couple feet further back than you are when you're playing a piece of music, where you can see further ahead and kind of predict where you think your fingers are going to go. So I find that transposition is a very rewarding and, you know, always yields fruit in this realm of improvising.
Well, I like to hear that, Nathan. I teach transposition in the keyboard skills classes at Juilliard, and the pianists always dread having to transpose Schubert and Schumann Lieder. But you're absolutely right. I mean, learning these beautiful progressions from a Schubert Lieder and playing them in different keys, you can start making up your own things rather naturally after you're doing it for a while. So, all right. Well, we have another planned group improv activity before we try out some of the wonderful ideas that people have been chatting into us. So if you have any affects, any themes you want us to improvise on, any little vignettes, it's not too late to submit them on the chat, although we already have some really good ones. So please do that. But in the meantime, Seren, Nathan, and I are going to do a collaborative variation set on the Vogelfänger aria from Magic Flute, the Papageno's aria. You'll recognize it immediately. It's the most popular tune, probably in the opera, and one of the most popular Mozart ever wrote. It's in D major. So their Vogelfänger theme, the birdcatcher theme. I'm going to play the theme, and then the three of us are just going to go around the Zoom room, the StreamYard room, and do various variations in familiar patterns that Mozart, you know, does in his own variation sets. And then Seren's gonna wrap it up at the end. So here are our Nathan Ehang Seren variations on der Vogelfänger. Bravo, bravo, guys. Thank you so much, Nathan, Surin. That was so much fun. So you can't kill that theme. It's just too good, but wonderful to hear you, what you came up with. Okay, well, we don't have much time left, and I definitely wanted us to try some of the ideas the audience has thrown up us. So how should we do this? Who amongst the three of us would like to volunteer to do something? I know, Nathan, we can always throw something at you, but Suren, would you like to do something, or?
Sure, I'd take an affect, but we don't.
Yeah. Let's give you an affect. We have some great ones. Thank you again, audience, for sending us your wonderful ideas.
I would love to see what Suren does with confusion.
Confusion. That's a good one.
That's my state of being, Nathan.
Yes, mine too. So at least. All right. So here is the affect confusions, and Suren Berry will take it away.
Okay.
That's great. My confusion has dissipated and total clarity. Thank you, Suren. That was Suren improvising on the affect confusion in D minor, right? Thank you so much. That's beautiful. So I'm, as my host, I'm going to just decide to improvise on something that someone submitted. Thank to Conrad Cummings, a good friend of mine. He said, let's see, you're getting ready, you're excited about a big party, but then you're sad. Wait, where does it, I missed word. Anyway, I think it's.
What I see is getting dressed for a big party.
Getting
What
dressed
should
for a
I
big
wear?
party. What should I wear? Oh gosh, I'm so girly. Getting dressed for a big party. What should I wear? Okay, I think I can do this one, which is why. Thank you, Conrad. I'll do a short one on this. Okay, so that was me looking for a dress for a party in E flat major, so obviously pink. Okay, Nathan Nico Canzano, famed fugue improviser, thrown down the gauntlet for you, and has a fugue subject. I think he wrote it.
There's one that he has that's ACEFBEC, which I will just, so that everyone is clear what it is and that I'm not changing it. It'll start with something like this. But I'm gonna improvise a little prelude before the fugue.
Wow.
Wow, speechless, Nathan. That was beautiful.
Thank you so
A
much.
fully improvised prelude and fugue on the subject by Nico Canzano, played and improvised by Nathan Mondry. And Nathan's in Ithaca, Suran in Manhattan. I'm here, Roosevelt Island, New York City. Thank you so much to the both of you for all of your wonderful improvisations, your sharing your thoughts on how to improvise in historical styles today. I can't wait to keep doing it with you and from what I've learned. So please contact Nathan and Suren. I'm just putting it out there. And you can go bother them and have them show you cool stuff like that. But anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. And our next International Fortepiano Salon online will be November 19th. Please stay tuned for our upcoming episodes. We always bring very interesting musicians and fortepianists from around the world, and we get to see their instruments and hear about what they're doing in the world of music. So thank you again to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to the Academy of Fortepiano Performance and the Catskill Mountain Foundation, and to Sarah Taft and Joan Oldknow for their wonderful technical support, and to my co-host, Maria Rose. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.